welcome everyone. Right. Welcome everyone, and thank you to Trista for trusting me with this honor of introducing to you Barrett, Anna, and Stephan. I'll be the moderator today, but they need no help. I chatted with them yesterday, and they pretty much took it. But we are going to start off with a little bit of an introduction from each of them. And Anna, would you like to go first?
Alphabet, that always ends up with me. Hi, good morning. My name is Anna Henschel. I am one of our three MBA class of 2018 graduates. I live in New York. Sorry, we're just going to be joined by my cat to start. It's easier that way. I live in Brooklyn, New York. I'm originally from New York, and I came here by way of New Orleans for about 8 years and then a short stint in Western Mass. Currently working for American Express as a program manager in the technology department. I also, if anyone needs to talk about it, spent a fantastically strange 14 months at WeWork that taught about as many lessons as anywhere else I've ever worked. And yeah, my background's in kind of program project management and analytics from an MBA perspective, and I have an undergrad degree from Bard College. So that's me.
Thank you, Anna. And if anybody wants to read a really inspiring paragraph, read what Anna wrote about her time and encouraging note to her fellow WeWork people, because I read that and I was like, oh, I'm going to screenshot that. It was so awesome. So you guys were lucky to have each other for sure. Okay, Barrett, you want to? Okay, Barrett, you want to go next?
Hey, Barrett, as much as I like it, we can't hear you right now.
You got to apologize. I'm a little. I haven't been doing the Zoom thing very long. No. Thanks. So my name is Barrett Mully. I graduated in 2003 with an engineering degree. I sailed in the merchant marines for 4 or 5 years on ocean-going vessels. Was the engineer on board. Got a lot of hands-on experience. Found myself wanting to be shoreside, so I got a job as a operator in a nuclear power plant up in Vermont. I worked there. I worked my way up to a senior reactor operator, a control room supervisor. So I was basically the one telling Homer Simpson what to do with the switches. So I had a 10-year run there. And then once the plant shut down, we shut down back in, I think it was 2014 to 12, I think. Natural gas shut the nuclear power plant down because it was just a lot cheaper. I worked on the decommissioning of the plant and defueled the vessel for the first decommissioning process, and then had to really figure out what I was going to do with my life. So I decided to get an MBA, and that's where I found myself meeting these two guys, and decided that, with an MBA and an engineering experience, it kind of gives me a carte blanche to really figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life and the rest of my career. So during my MBA, my first year, I met my business partner currently, and we started a small business out of the technology that actually came out of UMass. So we run we have a startup out of Hadley, Massachusetts. It's a electrochemical technology, a water treatment technology that we've commercialized and that we've brought to market, and now we're starting to scale. So we've been doing this since basically I was in an MBA my first year running this business, bringing it up to speed. And to date, we're making sales. We've raised over $2 million in funding, and we're really starting to grow the team and expand. So that's where we are.
Wow, that's amazing. Startups. I know that there's one startup that I know of that started within our cohort. So kudos to you for being able to put that together. I know a lot of people aspire to be that or to do that. Stephan, you want to close it out with intros?
Sure. So my name is Stephan Wallenberg. I have a much less interesting and more linear background than Barrett and Anna do, or like most people do, I guess. So in undergrad, I focused on sustainability. And basically since then, I've worked in sustainable energy in one place or another. So I worked for a nonprofit for a couple of years. I moved to a quasi-governmental agency for a little while where I did a lot of energy purchasing and energy efficiency with municipal buildings. I worked as an independent consultant for about a year and a half. And that was when I applied to, applied to get my MBA at Eisenberg. Since then, I off-roaded. So after my first year on campus, I had a former coworker reach out to me to suggest that I look at a job at National Grid, which I ended up being really interested in, and that's where I've been working since. So my current role at National Grid is I'm in charge of the strategy for the residential energy efficiency programs within National Grid. So that's it's like $200 million worth of programs every year that bring in the residents of the Commonwealth over $500 million in benefits every year. So it's a pretty cool job. It is, like I said, a more linear trajectory. I didn't spend fun time in New Orleans, but I also, like Anna, grew up in New York and have found myself back in New York now. So Anna lives like 2 miles that way from me. So it's fun for that to have all worked out. Yeah, so looking forward to chatting more.
Awesome, thank you. And you guys are so lucky to be living close to each other, and maybe you get to meet for coffee or tea sometimes. That would be lovely. Stephan, do you want to talk a little bit about just the matriculate, or like the off ramping and how that went for you? Because I know some people might be thinking about that into their second.
Yeah. So I had already started an internship for the summer when I had that former coworker reach out to me. And when I went into the program, I knew that off-ramping was a possibility, but it's not something that I had any intention of doing when I started. When I had that person reach out to me and I looked at the job, honestly, like I was pretty torn about the whole thing because I'd had such an amazing experience on campus for that first year. Like I formed really good relationships. In addition to those good relationships, I met Barrett. So, you know, it was hard for me to decide that I was going to off-ramp, but I felt as though I'd already formed a lot of strong relationships. I'd met some great professors. I'd learned a lot of new skills, which I was excited about. And I knew that Eisenberg had the infrastructure to make sure that the remainder of my education would be just as high quality as the first half was, even if it was maybe not as quite as much fun to be around some of the folks that I'd met already. So honestly, it was really seamless. I had an opportunity, it worked out, and everything really just turned out pretty well for me.
Awesome. It's good to hear. I know Eisenberg has a really good online reputation, and so I'm happy that worked out for you. To Barrett and Anna, you guys stayed on for your second year, and I'm curious to know how did you go about really capitalizing on those electives? You know, you only have 9 more credits to take in at the beginning of your second year. And but how did you really make use of those electives to really sort of broaden the scope of your knowledge base?
Barrett and I did really different things our second year. So, I mean, Barrett, why don't you talk about a clarity, and then I'll do more of the academic side.
Yeah, sure. So I obviously, my background is an engineer, and Mike Famighetti's on this call. And I think when he saw my resume and tried to figure out where to put me for a fellow, he had no idea and kind of threw a dart at a board, and it hit entrepreneurship, right? So I think that's just dumb luck, but it actually worked out really well. And that's probably one. Mike, you can take that one. I'll give you a thumbs up on that one. That really kind of, what that did for me is for the elective wise, what I was able to do is use the electives to help me establish. I was not a business person, right? I've never run a business. I've run big power plants and ships and stuff. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. So what I did is I found the electives that I thought would help me kind of start the business and start understanding more of the business concepts and really understanding what it is to build a business. So a lot of the electives that I took were, I took an AROB class about, it was a reading class and really understanding like the minimum viable product kind of, process of building a product and really launching it and understanding all this stuff. So I really utilized not only the classes, but also the people around me who had that experience. And even in my fellowship, I was using the people that I was quote unquote teaching to be like, what did you do in this situation? Like, are you, because they were at the same level as basically I was trying to get a product to market. So I used all those experiences and benefits from all the professors and all the students around me to really jumpstart the business. And actually, one of the electives that I took, I actually was able to spend the time to write a grant to get some money from the federal government. And that's actually was the start of our business cash. And that's what actually started our business, was this elective that gave me the opportunity to use people in Eisenberg to help me write this grant to basically help us get money to start the business. And I wouldn't be here without that. So.
Yeah, I took much more of the like, I am here and I'm just going to spend my time on the academics of being here, kind of knowing that I was going to pivot more heavily. So Barrett and I both did that kind of, we convinced Professor Alan Robinson to do a book club for us. And so we just made him come up with a bunch. It was basically the curriculum, the books he couldn't fit into the ops curriculum and things that he was excited about. And we made him just do that. And it took some convincing, but it was fun. Professor Chris Sims did a sort of multi-part kind of, here's how to really apply what you've learned, because you spend so much time in your first year on like kind of traditional academics like finance and operations and HR. And the next course we took with Sims was more of a like, okay, but what happens in the real world? Here's a real situation. What do you actually do with that? How do you draw on what you're learning? So we managed to have some kind of independent study as a group classes, but then I really took advantage of what Eisenberg had. So I took supply chain, I took more analytics, I took 2 or 3 analytics classes. And then I figured out through talking to Bobby and Mike, what classes we could pull together that would make a project management foci, which I really wanted. So it just kind of took some creativity, but there's so much, especially because of the undergraduates, there's so many classes that have all kinds of potential around Eisenberg that I really just dove into everything that was there and figured while I was still in Western Mass, you know, the great thing about the fellowship was that I had the opportunity to just focus on academics. So I did that.
And actually, Anna, the Chris Sims connection is he's now one of my investors, and that's where I first met him. So he's actually invested in my company, and he's part of our team.
That's all amazing information, and I loved hearing about your journeys. But I think this is a good place to sort of pause and see if there's any questions from our the folks in the audience. Are there any questions? Just feel free to unmute.
I have a question. I think it's for Anna, but it could be for anybody. So I am also somebody on a relatively nonlinear path. I did a liberal arts undergrad, and I'm really trying to focus on analytics while I'm at Eisenberg. And I'm wondering, once you're in a role in a company, so not so much the electives, but once you're in a role, how do you kind of, while still performing in that role, kind of show and demonstrate, you know, the level of skill that you have, whether that's communication or, you know, more of the technical side?
It's a really great question. And when we were kind of prepping with Wendy yesterday, Stephan said something that I think all 3 of us feel very strongly, that as much as you learn in the Eisenberg, you mostly learn on the job. Like, as much as, you know, you can be prepped technically to do all of these things, you actually find out that it's this one aspect of Excel that you're going to be using for forecasting all the time, and you really get to know while you're actually working with it. So the best thing that I can say is just to kind of, if you're already in the role, so post-interview, you're already landed. I've had really good luck with just saying, like, I'm really excited about that. When a project comes up in a meeting, being like, you know, I would love to join in on that. I would love to just like continuing to show interest every time you can. And getting, if you're already there, then you actually have the opportunity to say, you know, this is a skill set of mine. People don't know, right? People don't know what you don't tell them, and they don't know what you're capable of. And they also don't know what you're not capable of. So there's kind of a weird confidence standard there that you can tell them anything. And if you have the ability to say like, that really excites me, and you can put in the work, whether it's during or off hours to really prove yourself, they're going to give you the next project. Like, everyone is looking for you to be as capable as possible, and you can agree with them and tell them that you are. I don't know if that's answering as fully. The reality is they want to trust you.
That answers my question.
I also, just really quickly, I think it kind of extends beyond like once you're in the role too. Like, I think the reality is that most employers, they might want a specific, for some roles, they're going to want some specific experience or some specific skills. But the reality is that most people really value like critical thinking, people that are willing to take things on, people that demonstrate that they can learn new things quickly, because Anna already said it, right? Everything really is going to be on the job. So when I look at prereqs or requirements or experience or whatever for jobs that I'm applying for or looking at, I think that obviously you have to pay attention to those things, but also don't be overly intimidated by them. Don't be hesitant to kind of stretch yourself into saying, yeah, I do meet that requirement. Even if I don't have every single skill, I'm at least confident that I could grow into those things. I don't think that you should be scared of doing that. You shouldn't lie. But you should stretch yourself.
I think the most powerful tool that you have is admitting that you don't know something, right? Everyone doesn't know everything. I've worked in very technical fields, and when someone says, oh, I know how to do that, that's scary, that they know how to do everything. And putting yourself out there and being vulnerable and saying, I don't know how to do that, but I'm willing to learn. Can you teach me? Can I watch over your shoulder? That shows the initiative that you are willing to do that and take the extra step. Maybe it's outside your job function, but that shows that person that, wow, this person really wants to understand this and really learn this, maybe not to benefit their job, but themselves. And that's what's really important.
I can say something too. The comments so far have really resonated with me because our faculty aren't really trying to teach you everything you need to know on the job, but to share kind of a base level of competence that helps your ability to learn more, right? To provide a foundation so that you're ready to go out there and learn a lot more on the job in a really short amount of time. And so that's basically when I design my own class, when faculty design their class, our goal is to help you learn to learn. And then you get out there on the job, and it's much more of a fire hose approach of exactly right what you need to know for that company and that context. So this really, again, just resonates with me, what everyone is saying, and is exactly what I would expect to hear.
Professor Hess, I have to say this. I thought of you the other day. I had cause to refer to something as a federated structure and went, oh my God.
Oh my goodness,
thank
it's
you.
so exciting.
I still know that. Thank you.
Like a month and a half ago, I texted Anna. I was like, there's this approach with the thing. And I was like, balanced scorecards. I remembered it in the shower.
Oh, yeah.
I realized that National Grid was doing kind of a terrible version of a balanced scorecard. Sorry.
Cool. Great.
Funny you guys even mentioned that, because that's exactly what we were covering in information systems this week. So that's very poignant. Good timing. But while we were preparing yesterday, you all had said a few things about the MBA in general, and a couple of them was it provides a working understanding of a lot of information, and it limits your fear going into these, going into the next phase of your career, whether that be a startup or a job. And when you guys are, or when you were in the position of interviewing or approaching people for funds, what are the key sort of phrases or buzzwords that you like to use that you learned as an MBA and that have worked for you?
This is such a big question.
I use validated learning a good amount. There's obviously a lot of innovation happening in energy, especially with grid modernization. In the energy efficiency portfolio, I also oversee our residential demand response. And And there's a lot of money that's available to spend on trying to innovate. But with all of that money, right, I think comes a lot of responsibility to make sure that if you are testing things, like if you're demonstrating things, you're being really, really rigorous about what it is you're actually trying to find out. Like, I think that I've seen at other utilities and just in other places, right, there's this desire to just do something new because it's kind of cool, and it's like technology, infrastructure, like systems, like all of these fun buzzwords that get rolled into it. But at the end of the day, sometimes they end up not really proving anything because they didn't start by saying, this is what we don't know, this is what we learned somewhere else, and this is what we're really going to find out. And we're going to design everything that we're doing to make sure that we are proving that one thing, right? Like that idea of validated learning. So it both sounds cool if you can drop it into a conversation, and I think that it is actually genuinely valuable.
Yeah, I use a lot that came out of our operations classes, that MVPs, change management, continuous improvement, a lot of that has been really relevant. Enterprise thinking comes up a lot at Amex. That's one of Amex's favorite terminologies. But in general, just I think it tends to be less for me. I mean, it's always helpful to have the terms that, come out of school that you could just kind of drop into a conversation. It is for me always whatever you can read about the company, whether you're reading their principles, their statements, their anything like that, the job descriptions, always like picking out those terms that are the more unique terms and using those, because translating whatever I learned into the way that they talk makes me sound like I'm already of them, and that's comforting. So that's my spin.
Yeah, I would say for me, it's kind of playing the field as co-founder and kind of wearing a lot of hats here. The one thing I always come back to like strategy. I think it was a Tom Moliterno 3-hour class on a Saturday or something. I forget what it was, but like what levers can you pull to leverage certain things, right? So like levers and leverage always is that thing that investors are like, oh my God, you know how to speak MBA. And you're like, I'm just talking like, I'm just using the terms, but that and value add, like what, if you pull this lever, what value add is a quantitative kind of data point. So that's basically, those are the things that I think I use a lot.
Value add is something that I think about often, even in, random interactions with my daily life. But like breaking things down into what's value added and what is not, like what would somebody pay for in this way that I wash dishes, right? So, but the thing that I've taken away is the business strategy, the organizational strategy, and the information strategy triangle. For whatever reason, that was very impactful for me. And I'm wondering if there's anyone in the audience who would like to share sort of their favorite buzzwords or things that they're applying in their lives right now, or professors. And if not, that's okay. That's okay. I know it's early.
Wendy, I was just gonna say too, one thing that I remember hearing about, I did the online MBA and coming through and people saying, well, what do you hope to take away from the degree? And like, what are the core fundamentals you hope to learn? And I remember somebody telling me, it's not so much, it's a culmination of all the experiences and the way that it makes you think differently. And that I think is so true. I'm never going to be a full accountant, and God, I barely survived that class. If it wasn't for Pam Trafford, I never would have survived that class. But I just remember saying, like, I'm not going to be an accountant. I'm not going to be this, but just the way that an MBA makes you think differently. And I still, to this day, I think it's so true. Once you get through all the curriculum, you just view everything you do so differently. Every decision you're making, every time you're in a meeting or potentially thinking about different outcomes, you're just thinking differently. So like, I think that was one of the takeaways from an MBA for me.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Wendy, I thought your question was great about buzzwords, because I think an MBA is a lot of buzzwords. There are a lot of buzzwords.
All lip service.
Well, no, but some of it is, yes, absolutely. But when you kind of look at jargon, it kind of signifies your knowledge, what you can impart to others, right? Quickly, it also kind of shows what you know, if the other person understands that jargon. But you also have to be really cognizant and aware of other people's understanding of jargon and potential lack thereof, because you might be using these words as shortcuts to other people that someone else who went through the program or someone else who did an MBA would understand you very well. But other folks may not. So I think jargon is kind of a double-edged sword where you can kind of, show off your credentials very quickly by using these kind of fun words. But you can also lose a lot of people in the same regard. So just make sure that you're, make sure you craft the words that you use to the audience that you're working for sure. A lot can be lost in those translations.
Yeah, you don't want to sound like a Harvard MBA, right?
Nope, not at all. Yeah,
but as someone who observes MBAs going through, just with the on-campus MBAs in particular, it's amazing how words kind of circulate around individuals and how one person will start saying something and the other people say the same things over and over again. We were actually in our meeting, our campus, our office meeting the other day. I was picking up on the fact that everybody was piggybacking off of each other when they were saying things. And you'll watch this in MBA classes, the words that'll come through and they'll just say these words over and over again. So just be aware and conscious of that. And make sure that you're not, using that to the exclusion of other people, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's a really good point, Mike, because one of the things that I've observed in my life and my career is the overuse and the irresponsible use of value add. People love to throw that around in ways that is not even relevant to what it means, but it's such an incredible buzzword. So as you say, double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the really interesting things about being at WeWork, that I don't actually wish the company anything. It was a fascinating place to work for the minute that I was there. But it was a lot of people trying to prove to each other that they should work there. And I will never forget, my first interview was more of a network connection. We'll probably get into this in a minute, but as Stephan and I both said, that every job both of us have ever gotten has been a direct network connection from somebody else. And I was having that networking chat, and this network connection friend who I really didn't know that well said, "Oh yeah, I'll zip you the JD. I'll zip you the JD." He meant I will email you the job description. And I just remember being like, oh God, this is going to be a terrible idea. And he ended up being my boss. And, he was perfectly nice to work for, but you can tell from I'll zip you the JD, I would receive, in the course of one day, I would receive text messages, Slacks, emails, Facebook messages sometimes, like things were just flying in any direction as relevant. The lack, sometimes language and a desire to be kind of trendy and quick with it also betrays a lack of organization, and that you're using something as a shortcut to actually say something because you don't take the time to say it well.
Yeah, lack of awareness too. I think that plays into emotional intelligence too. Is if you don't know your own audience, you shouldn't be saying those words, right? So there's only certain ways that you should say value add. If it's some investor or someone that you want to be like, oh yeah, value add, and that's not how you talk. That's not how I talk to my wife at home. So, but very good point is use it when you need to, but don't use it in your daily vernacular.
Could I ask kind of a follow-up or related question, which is, do any of you have recommendations, or do you take certain courses or have other suggestions about your experience that were relevant in some of these kind of interpersonal skill development, or, you're all like really great speakers, and some of it might, you might just be that way, right? But in terms of like, as we're going out into the workforce or returning to the workforce, building relationships and all those kind of the soft skills, communication, negotiate. I mean, we have, of course, Mike's negotiation course, but are there any courses or experiences you had during the program that helped you develop some of those like interpersonal and people management skills?
I had a friend in college call me out one time because I didn't want to go to like an alumni event, or I forget exactly what it was. And she was like, you know what, Stephan, you just never push yourself. And that hit so hard. I don't know exactly what it was, but that hit really, really hard at the moment. And so I think that, I think there is something about intentionally making yourself uncomfortable that can really contribute to some of those things. Like it's a tough question because there's so many different facets to it. Like, I'm a theater kid, so I got a little bit of practice like that. I'm in many ways more comfortable like being on a stage than I am talking to someone one-on-one, which is kind of a weird place to be. But but I do think that generally, when you're talking about interpersonal skills and how to develop and how to just be more comfortable in more situations, I think a lot of that does come from being uncomfortable. Some of us, like Barrett, are just comfortable in any situation for no reason whatsoever, even when he like probably should be a little uncomfortable. But for the rest of us human beings, I think that finding places where you are a little uncomfortable and deliberately pushing yourself to be in those situations and make the most of it is really valuable. Like, the negotiations class made me very uncomfortable many times. And it was a pretty amazing learning experience. Like, networking things, I think it's really easy to go and like say, oh, I got 2 free drink tickets and a bunch of my friends are here, which is the majority of what I do. But I also sometimes try to set a goal for myself to like talk to one person that I wouldn't have normally talked to, even if it's just like a total stranger. And sometimes it is terrible, absolutely horrible. And I can see myself making other people uncomfortable. But honestly, like, even if my skills are not improving, just that ability to be uncomfortable and sit in it and live with it, I think is something that can be really valuable for me anyway.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's push yourself to uncomfortableness. And I think a good course, I think that's your question, is what course could you do that with? I think the mini practicum is, because you can carve. I think, Mike, I assume that's still a part of the program.
Oh, the integrated practicum now.
Oh, okay.
Mini was a really bad name for it.
Okay, so you can if you can still carve your own practicum out, like I did. I did stuff that I wouldn't necessarily have done either in my past life, or it kind of set myself up to be uncomfortable. So if you need to go interface with people more, right, you can carve that practicum out to do that with an objective for that particular class. So the mini practicum and kind of that, I think, is a good option, if that makes sense. Or I don't know what you call it. I apologize.
Yeah, thirding negotiations, I'd say so many times. I recommend it to anyone who can take any level of that class. But on top of that, networking events, which I recognize is obviously been pretty difficult these days. But one-on-one coffee chats, anytime that you can find an opportunity to speak to someone and have to practice saying who you are and what you do. And as much as the idea of kind of your elevator speech and all of that, like, I do not have a practice elevator speech. I say something different every time. I never know what I'm about to say. But all of the presentations that we had to do over the course of Eisenberg were really, really good for me, because I tend to BS, like, I'll write myself 3 bullet points and then say 5, and 2 of them are what I wrote. And I got much better at intentionally saying what I intended to say and in the right order. And actually, it's kind of structuring my thought in a way that even if I am going to be off the cuff, I am more kind of intentional and guided in doing that. But yeah, every interaction that you can have with people, honestly, even if they're friends, I mean, I don't know what form this will take, and hopefully everyone gets vaccinated and next year it'll happen. But like, TNOs, Thursday night outs, were great, because often you talk to someone in your cohort that you wouldn't have known. So every time that you can have an opportunity to talk to someone who isn't already on your group chat is helpful.
I agree 100% about just pulling yourself out of the comfort zone and checking your ego at the door. And I love what you're talking about as far as, making connections. And Stephan, you said something yesterday about, how to reach out to people and really capitalize on either geography or your shared, interests or area in which you are working. And you said that it's become more obvious to you that people need to know that it's okay to reach out for internships and jobs, but there's a right way to do it. Would you like to speak to the audience about that and maybe normalize this whole, because we're not in person and we're all trying to network, and maybe normalize how to network in a virtual world? And anybody else, but Stephan brought it up yesterday.
Yeah, I would definitely push people to get comfortable with the idea of reaching out to folks that you've never talked to before. Part of it is that depending on who you're talking to, like some of them might actually love it. Some of them might be like, oh my gosh, they reached out to me. And they'll get a little bit of an ego boost from that. And, so maybe you're doing them a little bit of a favor. I will say that, like I was saying yesterday, Wendy, and as you were sort of alluding to just now, I think that there are things that you can do to make those more successful, especially if you're reaching out to someone that is going to be very busy, that has a lot of things on their plate, that is going to have to carve out time like from their personal lives to help you. It's really, I think that the more specific you can be when you're trying to reach out to people, the more reason you can explain to them like why it is that you're reaching out to this person, what it is that you're hoping to get out of the interaction. I think that that's really valuable. You know what I mean? Like sometimes I'll get an email or a LinkedIn message or something that will be like, hey, I'm interested in a job. What can you do for me? And I'll be like, I don't know. I mean, have you looked at the listings page yet? Like, do you just want any job? Like, why are you reaching out to me? I don't know who you are. Like, we went to the same school, but like, give me something to work with. You know what I mean? Give me something to like, first make me want to talk to you. And second, allow me to be helpful for you. So just like doing really little things like telling the person why you reached out to them. So like, I see that you have a background in energy. I'm really interested in energy too. And I'm trying to get into the field. I didn't see any internships listed, which shows me that you looked at the listings page already. You're not coming to me to do a web search for you, right? Like those sorts of things. It means like, now I know why you're talking to me. I know what it is you're looking for. I know that you're not asking me to do something that you really should have done for yourself first. I think those little things just demonstrate that you're trying to make the most out of that person's time, and you have something that you want to get from them. And they have something that they can contribute for you that you couldn't do yourself. I think little things like that are really, really helpful and will make it so that the person wants to get back in touch with you and will find the time to do it.
Yeah, I had a similar experience applying to the role that I ended up getting at Amex, that I reached out to someone. It was kind of, again, a colleague, friend of someone else, and wrote kind of the intro email like, hey, here's why I'm interested in Amex, here's this, here's that, and then bolded in it. This is a Trista trick for me, like bolded the thing I wanted someone to pay attention to and said, I'm interested in these 3 roles. Is there any way you can help put me in front of the hiring manager? So if they were going to skim the like, oh, how are you? Great. All the fluff. Fine. Here's the ask. And he totally responded. He responded instantly because he looked at it, triaged it, and went, oh, I can deal with this and get it out of my inbox. Responded instantly and said, I'll refer you to 3 roles. Send me the job descriptions. Or so the job IDs. And I was like, and I seriously responded like, okay, I'm going to send them at 9 a.m. tomorrow. So you know when to look. I send 3 numbers. I got 3 referrals. Like it was almost transactional. And it doesn't always have to be that way depending on where you are in a relationship with someone. But he very clearly took the approach. I gave both options, right? I gave the like, fluff, we can talk. Do you want to have a phone call? And I gave the, if you want to be one and done with me, here's the thing I really need. And he got to pick his lane, which was an interesting way of doing it.
Also, a lot of companies give employees a bonus if they refer someone into a role. So that dude might have made some money just by responding to that and referring Anna into it. I'm sure he did it because Anna is like super awesome and he just wanted to help her and that he didn't care about the money, but doesn't hurt. So
that's awesome. And I like I like that you gave him two specific choices and it wasn't open-ended, you know? So that's always something that, that's a tip that I would give people as well. And
Anna, I just have a quick follow-up on that too, because I know that you do something when you are job hunting that I've gotten it a couple times when you were job searching, and I just thought, like, this is so intuitive. Can you talk about your process of communicating and sending out communications more broadly and how you kind of navigate setting up those connections? I know you send out an email and it's very well written, so maybe talk about your process in that.
Yeah, I definitely cast a bit of a wide net, and this is, you know, I managed to, why make it easy when it can be hard? I definitely didn't, like Stephan, have the foresight to pick an industry that I was going to get good at. I instead, kind of the way I think of it visually, I kind of did the opposite, which is I picked a skill, which is I really love kind of teams and coordinating and program management and all of that kind of work. And I'm more industry agnostic. So to date, I've managed to work in arts and real estate and technology in the last 5 years. And the way that I have found has been pretty successful is I basically take my kind of core group of people and go out one degree of everyone that I can think of that might be in an industry position to help me find a role either at their company or in their industry. And I send out a BCC email, nice, quick, you know, hey, I am on the job hunt. I'm looking for this. If you know anyone, I would love a referral. You know, if you want to just send me on to Wendy, great, let's do that. Or, you know, I live in New York. I would love to buy you a cup of coffee and understand more about what you do. And then, and this is a trick from my mother, listen to your mothers, don't leave that coffee chat without 3 names. Make them give you 3 people that are like, who would be interesting for me to talk to based on where I am. Often you get 1 or 2, but at least 1 keeps the thing going. And I probably, in my first job search where I landed at WeWork, I probably had 50 coffee chats. And all over New York, I went to more cafes than I can count and just talked, you know, what do you do? People love to talk about themselves and understand who, where, why, how they got there, all of that. And then they feel like there's a quid pro quo, thank you negotiations, where they want to help you because you've now let them talk. And they feel some kind of gratitude for that. And they'll basically pass you on to somebody else. And that's ultimately how I landed the connection that ended up with me at WeWork. And then when I was leaving WeWork, not that much later, I still had that list pretty fresh and said, hey, this is crazy. It was an easy reason to reach out because WeWork was all over the news and say, I am back on the job hunt. You know, again, I would love to get a coffee, but anyone who has a lead, I would be really interested. And people that time were pouring to help because they didn't know how to help WeWork. So they decided to help me. And and so just taking that same opportunity to say, you know, I'm on the job hunt. Here's something that you can do if you are interested in helping. Here's my most recent resume. If you want to pass it on to anyone, I'd love to buy you a coffee. And then you have to send the, oh my God, I got a job, because that makes everyone feel happy at the end. And you send that same email saying like, I landed something. I'm so excited. Thank you for your help. Thank you for your network. So it's worked out well.
That's a great story. And I wrote down pretty much every step of what you described. So I'll be hitting you up, guys, just so you know. Did anybody have any questions? I know I saw James unmute, but I don't know if that was if you had something to ask, or if you wanted, or if anybody else had something to ask at this point.
I was gonna ask what Anna actually answered, like how, because I think Stephan had talked about, you know, people just reaching out and not knowing what they want, but then Anna just answered, followed up with you know, the 3 things that you want, or maybe there's a particular job that you want, and the specific ask. Maybe I'll just ask another question, and I'll say, is there just from your experience, is there a good time to start looking for a job when you're in the program? Maybe from your own experiences.
I think I would kick that one to Anna.
I know neither of you did this. I would say it's a little dependent on where you're trying to be. So don't start hunting before you're willing to land one. Well, that's not true, but be willing to take advantage of what you get, essentially. If you start hunting, say, over December break, there are plenty of programs that, expect to hire grads that start after graduation. Iceberg doesn't tend to feed as many of them. And so it tends to be more kind of one-off relationships and things like that. That the turnaround from me interviewing for that WeWork job to starting my first day was 3 weeks. So there can be that kind, if you're going to take kind of my approach of like, hello, here's everyone I've ever met. Now you send an email. Now you start 40 coffee chats. Start that 2 weeks ago. As soon as you want, start building that network. To really start applying, often the turnaround is really short. So it's a little more about knowing what you want and knowing where you want to be. I knew I was moving to New York. So I didn't even start applying to roles in New York until the end of the summer after graduation, when my lease was up and I was ready to move. I spent that time going down to the city on weekends and kind of building my network. So there are a bunch of steps in the process depending on kind of how you take it.
Quick follow-up. So you talked a lot about networking, and it seemed to have worked a lot for you. Sometimes I feel like I'm being a little too aggressive when I speak to a person for the first time, and then I don't know whether to ask them. That ask, like, because maybe they don't know me very well. What would be good strategies? You feel good about somebody you met and you think they can help you. What would you ask them immediately? Should there be a follow-up email? I don't know. What would you recommend, especially if you just met the person for the first time? Like, I've just met you guys for the first time. I can't claim to know you very well after this.
I think asking people, my go-to, if I'm at a loss, my go-to is always kind of, how did you get to where you are? What is often the thing that is the most helpful for me and might be helpful for y'all on this call is you're looking at our background and going, what if that resonates for me? And how much does that help me structure or dream up how I could get to where I want to go? What of that story can I use? So learning about, it's data, it's collecting how people got to where they are and going, oh, sometimes it was networking. Sometimes they off-ramped midway through or found something through UMass. So I think asking people how they got to where they are, asking people, if there was anything in their background and their trajectory that they felt like was particularly helpful in landing where they are. And implicit in those questions is that you have respect for their position, right? You have respect for what they have landed themselves in. And then you can share a little about yourself and say, I am particularly excited about. You do have to know what you're excited about. And thinking about, if you have any suggestions, I'm thinking about ways to get myself from point A to point B. If what you specifically want from that person is for them to refer you to a job, you can say that. And whether you say it in your phone call or coffee, or you say it in an email afterward, you do always have to send a thank you. Is up to you and up to the time of the conversation, but asking people about themselves, because that gives you into the conversation.
I would say just this quickly. I think that's a really good point. People love to talk about themselves. They don't want to hear necessarily about you and where you've been, but you're like, you know what? And that's a way to continue that conversation. If you just met somebody that you're interested in either their company or their position, is I would love to follow up with you. And like, as Anna said, how did you get here? Can you explain to me more about your job? Can you explain more about, the culture of your business? Can you explain your daily kind of routine? People will talk. you'll have a half-hour conversation that will roll into an hour and a half, and they'll be canceling meetings just because they love to kind of talk about that stuff. And that's where you start establishing those types of relationships where I just had this call with James. This guy's awesome. He asked questions about me. He asked questions about the company. And you know what? He looks like he's qualified. Maybe, you send us your resume when you graduate. That's how you make that kind of switch to non-aggressiveness to, I'm really interested. I'm an active listener. I'm listening to what you're saying to me. And maybe when you listen to this person, if you can get them to that stage, maybe it's a company you're like, I don't want to be involved in this culture, right? They're using Zip Me I don't know, what was it? Zip Me the
JD.
JD.
Yeah, you're like, no, that's not where I want to be, and that can eliminate that. But that's just what I recommend. That's certainly something I do, and that's a tool that I use, is to continue on so that they know you're past just looking at from an academic sense or a professional sense, that you're actually really interested and you can have that communication, and that you can physically talk to people, and you're not super like awkward about like, I want to know more about job A. Can you tell me about job A? This is my qualifications. That's just, you need to separate yourself, and you need to be, you need to make yourself stand out. And I think that's one way to do it.
I will say, I think I agree with all of the things that Anna and Barrett just said. I also think that like, if someone reaches out to me through LinkedIn, I know that they're probably not going to be at my wedding necessarily. You know what I mean? Like, I think that we kind of understand the terms of the transaction, right? And that's a little bit like it varies, right? So if you're doing Anna's coffee chats, it's one thing. If you're meeting someone at a networking event, that's something else. But like, there are some interactions where I don't think you need to be too ashamed for the idea that it's sort of a, like, you're looking for help. And if they respond, it's because they're willing to help. You know what I mean? Like, if you reach out and you have an ask and you're asking for whatever, or even if you don't get directly to that ask, they know that you're not reaching out through LinkedIn because like you're looking for a recommendation on like which new mountain bike you should buy or something like that, right? So if they engage with you, then I think you should take that as a tacit acceptance that they're willing to help you. It may not be that much. It may be something very small, but like, if they respond, it's because they are willing to do what they can for you, to do something for you. So I wouldn't be too, hesitant to be upfront about asking for things sometimes too.
Stephan, you also said yesterday to think about what you require. And I think that really got my mind going about, what I require for the rest of my life and how a job fits into that. And you said, that you like innovation and excitement kind of, every 2 to 3 years. And I don't know if you wanted to speak to, like, I thought about like, I like to have freedom and I might want to travel. So, like things like that. And I think that that's really useful to communicate to people when they're in this stage of who they're going to be contacting. And if those companies really meet their requirements just for life in general, right?
Yeah, totally. And honestly, for me, it wasn't because I'm like a deeply introspective person that I realized that. It was because I had done this cycle of working somewhere for 2 or 3 years and then moving on. And then I was like, why do I keep moving? And I realized it was because I was bored. That's what it was. And so now, but now I'm looking for another job. And one of the things that I'm being really deliberate about is that I know that that's something that's important for me. So I'm like, does that mean that I need to do consulting? Because it means I'm going to get to work on lots of different projects and learn something new with each client that I work with, that sort of thing. And it could be different for each person, but I do think that is both something that's important for self-fulfillment and being happy in your role, or just in the life balance, work-life balance that you strike. But like you said, Wendy, and I hadn't really thought about it that way, I think it is also a good way of trying to explain to an employer why it is that you're looking for them. And I actually did do that. Like I did have an interview recently with a consultant, and they said, why are you interested in this firm? And I said, because I get bored really quickly. I like to and am good at learning new things. And I see that you guys have a lot of really diverse and interesting projects. That's why not only I want to work for you, but that's also why I would be really valuable to your firm, because I want to be in that position of doing something new.
That is so awesome. It's one of those beneficial byproducts that we get as being part of this MBA program, is speaking to alums like yourself. and this program. So I want to thank you guys, and I would like to know if you have any final like parting words for our guests, even if it's just bye. But
I'm not wise, so I have no pithy wisdom to impart. But I hope that you guys get to hang out with each other on campus and have lots of fun next year.
Mm-hmm. Sure. We hope so too. Yeah, go ahead, Anna.
No, I think this has totally become my mantra, especially in COVID, but prior as well. Like, there are no rules. There just aren't. And the reality is you can reach out to whoever you want. You can ask them whatever you want. You can use your professors and your cohort and your network however you want. You can get whatever job you want. So operate as if the structures don't exist and figure out how to make them work for you.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. So if there's nothing else, I thank you all. I'm grateful for this time with you, and the cohort thanks you as well. And we wish you all the best and success in everything that you do. So thank you.
Stephan, send me your resume. Guy, I could use this.
Pass it along to the master.